Welcome to our weekly Q&A with Mark. My name is Benji. I'll be hosting today. If Mark, you're ready, I'll go through some questions that we didn't get to last time around.
Yeah, all set when you are.
Mark, what are the top three budget-friendly brand upgrades for a landscaper under 3 million in revenue? I've been reading a lot about branding and I want to invest, but I can't break the bank on an expensive branding agency. That's a question from Tim a couple weeks back. Yeah, budget-friendly brand upgrades, Mark.
I love the question. I think it starts with a brand strategy, which is extremely expensive and very exhausting. The easiest way to do that this day and age without breaking the bank is definitely my famous answer: use ChatGPT. I think if you start by going through and getting into ChatGPT and just asking ChatGPT to ask you all of the necessary questions in order to create a brand strategy. Once it asks you the questions, if you go through a Q&A with ChatGPT and then ask it to create a brand strategy, I think what you'll find is it just mindfully extracts all of the information needed for you to create a brand strategy. Which oftentimes, if you're a great landscaper, you've probably never really sat down and focused on taking a course on creating brand strategy. So ChatGPT more or less will give you that experience, I think, at no charge at all. So I would go through that Q&A process, and then what I'd do is ask it to create your brand strategy in one clean document, and then really take a look at that and make sure that it resonates deeply with you and your leadership team or the people that you're building the company with. Now, ultimately, the easy way to look at brand is it's what you want people to say when you're not around, what you want to be identified for. And so make sure that that brand strategy really does tell that exact same story. What do you want people to say you are when you're not around 3 years from now or 5 years from now? And so what is it that you want to be known for? Do you want to be known as the best backyard retreat, outdoor living home builder for homeowners? Or do you want to be the best commercial snow plowing provider in your market? There's very, very different outcomes there. And I think what happens with most landscapers is they don't build a brand that really says anything. So they just kind of fall into the noisy world of just, I'm a landscaper. And what does that really mean at the end of the day? Does it anything outside the four walls of a house or commercial building could, necessitate calling a landscaper? And if you're just kind of in that entire sea of landscapers, I think you end up getting a lot of meaningless calls and leads, as opposed to if you're really amplifying a brand that speaks to a specific customer profile with a very specific set of needs, and you're serving those needs better than everybody else. It just becomes much easier to target those people with your website, with your social media, with any paid marketing campaigns you might have. And so it gets really, really easy for you to actually start to build that brand and do things that are far less expensive by just knowing exactly what that brand strategy is. So in my mind, the best place to start would be right there by creating the strategy. And then that helps you get more specific about what content you're generating and what you're putting out and how you're messaging. It helps you create better email campaigns, which are very inexpensive, better direct mail that speaks to that ideal customer and really shares your value proposition and how you solve those problems for them more clearly than you would otherwise when you're not really in touch with your brand strategy. And maybe it might make sense to go and hire somebody just on Fiverr or Upwork online to develop a new logo that speaks to that ideal customer profile and this new brand strategy that you've developed. Again, that's a relatively small expense. So, everything I've just talked about is maybe somewhere between $3,000 and $10,000 to create a strategy, deploy email, direct mail, update your website. I think you can do that relatively inexpensive but it all starts with a really clear brand strategy document.
Okay, and this next question is from Erin. She says, I love the data-driven focus with regard to marketing. How do you see the marketing role in LeanScaper's vision? Is it a separate position completely? Is it tied in with sales? Or is it simply adopted as a job duty by office staff? And then I asked her to tell us a bit about her business. She says they are a large commercial landscaper slash athletic field installer. Just for some context there, Mark.
Yeah, larger companies, I totally believe that there can be a marketing manager or a director level for marketing. Smaller companies, it's definitely usually going to be owned by the owner or one of the senior leaders, and the actual execution would probably be outsourced to a marketing agency. In larger companies, even with a director or a manager, I still believe you'll probably need the support of an agency to do some of the more tactical work. Learning how to manage Google Analytics and all of the Google for Business tools that exist, all of the meta dashboards and all of the ad platforms that are supported with LinkedIn, Instagram, Facebook. Those are fairly technical jobs this day and age. And quite often, when you're spending money on ads and on any of those digital platforms, you can waste a lot of money really quickly, or you can optimize your ad spend with better targeting and better retargeting tactics, understanding how to utilize your lists and lookalike audiences and whatnot. And this is a fairly technical piece of the pie. And so in my mind, your marketing manager would be understanding exactly what the objectives are on behalf of the company, and then really taking that brand strategy and creating a marketing strategy, and then working with a agency to deploy that strategy and manage the more tactical components using experts in each area. So by all means, I think it's a great idea to have a manager. I would just caution that the actual execution is usually still taken care of by an expert agency.
Awesome. This is a question from Ian. Ian, I recognize your name. I think he was really involved in the online version of our Miami group. So thank you for coming, Ian. He says, I am setting up the balance scorecard from LeanScaper for my design and build crews, and I'm struggling with crew revenue goals because sometimes the crews are 3, and then sometimes they dip to 2 if the crew is finishing a deck, for example. They could be producing group revenue per hour, but they miss on the overall revenue. So I think it's just a question about dialing in scorecards for specific situations. Does that question make sense, Mark?
Yeah, I'll go to the whiteboard on this one. I think it's a really good question that we should just, give a meaty answer on, because
Sure.
I think it's a really common question and a really good one. So generally speaking, I'm going to draw a very simple org chart just to illustrate this answer. Now, we're going to get down, we'll say field management, whatever that structure is upstream, could be really complex in a big company, or it could be very simple. It could just be the owner here in the case of a smaller company. So whatever happens upstream is a question depending on the size of the company. What we're going to do, though, is we're going to just get down immediately to the field level. So let's say that we've got 4 crews out in the field. And again, this could be duplicated as many times as needed. So if you've got 20 crews, then just multiply this org chart by 5. But ultimately, let's say field management has a goal, in this case, of $2 million. It's really important that when you're building an org chart that you cascade revenue. And so if I've got a field manager or owner that has a $2 million budget, I've now got 4 crews that need to get that done. Now, one crew, for whatever reason, might be a 900K crew, and that's completely fine. And we may have another one that's 300. That's fine too. And then we may have 2 more 400s. So regardless of the crew size on any given day, your crew can be 2 people one day and 5 the next. We all know this is the way it is, but there is a consistent thing on every crew, and that's the crew leader or crew manager. I prefer to use that title. So I'm going to say crew manager. Some people call them foremen, some people call them leaders. So I'm going to say crew manager Joe. I'm just going to use CM here, Jim, CM, Jen, and CM Jose. All right, so we've got 4 crew managers that all add up to $2 million. Now, I don't care whether it's 2 people, 3 people, 4, or 6. At the end of the year, I need to make sure that each of these people perform this much work in order for us to hit this goal, which probably rolls up to an org-wide goal of, let's say, 10 million that may be made up of many, many divisions that have branches. So the key here is I'm trying to develop an organizational chart that has revenue that rolls up to the top. Now, regardless of what's happening day to day, I need a balanced scorecard that has a revenue goal for every manager or leader that is going to have direct reports in the company. And so this is the philosophy. So these revenue goals on your scorecards have to be a plan for the year for that crew manager. And that's really the way that we look at this. Did that help, Ian?
I'm sure it did, but you can get back to us, Ian, if there's a follow-up question on that, and we can go back to the vibe board if we need to. We got another great question from Shane here. I think a relatable one. With having a small team, 5 team members total, I feel pulled in way too many directions. What are a few key action items I can take to reduce the chaos and create more structure for myself? I do landscape and hardscape install.
5 key areas, or sorry, 5
He
people
says
was the answer.
5. He has 5 team members, and I think let's maybe say 2 or 3, like action items that he can take to give himself a little bit more structure and tame the chaos a bit.
All right, so again, I just like using sketches because it's a little bit easier. If you think about your job as an operator, which is the level you're at right now, because you're operating the business and you don't have a management team, you're responsible for revenue. So you're bringing in new revenue. You're responsible for finance. You're taking care of the financial controls in the business. You're definitely responsible for operations. And you're also really responsible for people. So we call this this mix that on the scorecard, we actually call this piece the customer. So when you think of the way that you spend your time, ultimately, when it relates to customers, we're generally trying to get revenue or we're trying to keep revenue. So here, we're doing things like sales, marketing, we're dealing with callbacks, and we're trying to retain our customers. All that good stuff. With retention, with finance, we're doing accounting, budgeting. We're setting our prices. We're estimating, making sure our estimates are right. We're doing job costing, this kind of stuff. With operations, we're running the project work, which is, keeping track of people, materials, equipment, subs. And then people we're hiring, we're training, we're directing day to day in this situation when you're at your size. So there's a lot happening. No accident that you feel a little overwhelmed. Now, what does your calendar look like to support this? So now let's just look at this and say, how would I actually structure my calendar? Well, I've got to have time for all of this, and I've got a big, busy week. So if I say Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, and we'll just make this Saturday and Sunday, because an owner-operator's calendar, I'm sorry to say, isn't always as balanced as you'd like it to be this time of year. So you'll probably end up doing some work on the weekends. That's part of the sweat equity of getting started. So what I'm going to try to do is I'm going to try to build block time that actually allows for these things to happen more effectively. So if every morning, let's say from 7 till 11, I block out and I say, hey, those hours I have to be in the field every day. And here, during those hours, I'm going to really make this my operations time. So again, I start to look at what am I going to do in that block? Well, I'm going to run my operations piece from 7 to 11 daily. That's going to be a nonstop thing because I have to be out there making that happen. Now, while I'm out there in the field, I should also be thinking about training, right? So I can also link my training back to that time block. Now, then I want to say, well, I need to also be doing sales consistently. So maybe from 3 to 6 p.m. daily, I'm going to work on growing revenue and dealing with my customers. So I make this my customer block. And so again, every day between 3 and 6, I'm really focused on growing revenue, sales, marketing, retention, keeping my customers happy. So I've created a block just for my customer. And then again, finance, I have to be able to do some accounting on a regular basis, but I'm not going to make it a daily block. I'll probably have these other blocks where I've got from 11 till 1 and from 1 till 3 daily. And what I'll do in these blocks is I'll put in other things that I need to be doing. Maybe I should be working on hiring 1 day a week for 2 hours. Maybe I should be working on building systems for 2 hours. Maybe I need to be working on my estimating. I'll pick some time blocking that suits each. So again, I'll maybe blend finance and people, and I'll rotate that between 11 and 1, and I'll pick things to do in there. And then again, 3 to 6. So I'll pick things off of my blocks, off of these lists, and fill them in. But ultimately what I'm doing is I'm building a big block time for field ops, a small block time for finance and people, and then a big block time for customer. And then this other block time, I might just kind of make this like my project time. So I've got 2 hours to do whatever I need to be doing specific to the projects in the company. And those could be continuous improvement projects where you're building the business, again, working on the business, not in it. Or, maybe it's just that time of year where I just have to be working on the projects themselves, like actual contribution time out on the job site. Now, you know better what these block times are for you, but I think when you start to look at your business in 4 quadrants and you start to create block time calendaring where there's repetitive time and you know generally what tasks you're going to put in each, this really has a big impact on your functional time and where you're spending it. But more importantly, I think it gives you a lot more clarity on how you're actually going to improve the business as it relates to the customer perspective, the financial perspective, the operational efficiency, and building people.
Mark, I'm just going to tack on a question that I know is going to be on the minds of the audience, which is yeah, I can lay out my roles and I can sort of make the buckets and I can build a schedule. But what about when fires erupt in my business? And the reason I ask this is because I hear this objection all the time to block scheduling and time blocking as you're describing it, which is I could go ahead and do all that, but I'm not going to be able to follow it in the first place. So what's the point? Do you have maybe just some thoughts to dismantle that belief system?
Yeah, I mean, the fires never stop, and that's part of being in business. And most of the time, the fires are related to the actual ongoing operation. And so again, when I block between 7 and 11 daily to work on projects, I should deal with the fires, the immediate fires there. But by having a 2-hour block each afternoon, let's say, to work on the business, Then what I do is I work on building systems that reduce the number of fires. And so every day I'm always working on the fires themselves to keep the wheels moving. But then I'm also working on creating some systems that prevent those flow interruptions and problems from continuously happening. And when you spend 4 hours solving problems and 2 hours creating systems that prevent them, what happens is the business just starts to grow a lot faster because you're enabling other people to utilize those systems to work with fewer fires. And so the business just gets better and better and better. And so sometimes people misunderstand this idea of working on the business, not in it. I kind of think that's bullshit. Like at the end of the day, you go to work and you work in the business, particularly when the business is a little smaller. You work in the business really hands on, and it feels like there's never enough time. But when you really start to learn that you can only spend half the day out there doing the work and then spend the rest of the day working on the finances, the people, the hiring, the systemization, the estimating, the customer care, the sales, the marketing, then it just starts to become a flywheel. And it is really hard to see it in the moment when you're overwhelmed because there's a never-ending stream of things to do. But I think it's really important to always think back to the 80-20 rule and just remember that 80% of the stuff that you're doing may not really be adding as much value as you think. Usually there's about 20% of the activities that we're performing in a day that are giving us 80% of our actual outcomes. So we want to figure out what that 20% is. And when you go to the job site every day and you kick off the job with intent and you let people know what you expect to get done each day, that's really high return on value, right? We need to be there to make sure people know what the goal is, and then we need to be there to help them create better plans. We need to be able to help them learn how to do things, get better skills. You know, we're focused on those things while we're on the job site so that we can leave and then create more scalable systemization of the business and more revenue and more understanding of what financial success looks like by creating better estimating templates and better pricing models and having more understanding of job costing so that we can figure out where to change prices or what services we should do more or less of. And so I really truly believe that just having that discipline to step out of the business activity in at least 2 to 3 hours a day and work on the continuous improvement systemization and initiatives, you will see very, very fast improvement, much faster than just getting stuck in the firefighting every day, all day. Even if it's just 1 to 3 hours a day working on the business, you'll see that things will change very, very quickly. Most business owners, unfortunately, just stay right in the chaos and they never step out for 1 to 3 hours a day.
Hope that answered your question, Shane. Let's move on to one from Chris. I think this is tying back to some stuff that we covered in Miami. He's asking, in building a new culture of growth and starting to develop IDPs for the employees, how would you start this process? Should I be re-interviewing people? Should I just begin with a conversation? Where's the best place to begin?
The best way to begin to create individual development plans, first off, I would strongly suggest that you develop your org chart for this year and then look forward into year 2 and year 3 so that you know what the org chart is should look like at the end of each year. Now, once you've got the org chart, you know what you need, and you create supporting job descriptions for every role. And when you start to look at the people that you have in the organization, if people are close but not quite there, then it's very much worth talking with them, sitting down with them, showing them what you need, and then making sure that that's what they want. I think it's really important, first off, to describe to them exactly what you're looking for and what this job description will require. And I think helping them see their own skills gaps by going through a skills gap analysis with the individual, and then kind of mapping out together what it would take to upskill and learn what things are missing. Now, again, we want to make sure that they really want this. And so it's really important that when you sit down to do any career mapping or a career development plan, that you really do understand where they want to be in 3 years. So I think ideally, you ask the employee to come to you and tell you where they'd like to be in 3 years. And when you're showing them your strategic plan, and then ask them where they see themselves fitting into it, and then you can actually create a plan together of what you could do together to get them to the point where they'd be prepared to help you at the level they see themselves. That could be a crew manager, could be a project manager, operations manager, could be your chief financial officer, whatever role they see themselves playing. We just need to make sure that it's well documented and they see how it fits into your overall strategic plan. And you need to make sure that they want that, because one big mistake I've made in my career over and over is thinking somebody wants a bigger opportunity than they're prepared to actually step into. It's a really common problem. I think many leaders do it. We offer people these incredible jobs that sound great, but we don't really describe exactly what is needed in terms of personal development and professional development to step into that role. And so we give them the title and we let them step into the role too fast, and then they flounder and fail and leave.
Next question is from Nemanja, who's got a question on marketing. We're in the process of scaling our overall marketing strategy and all its channels. Would you recommend doubling down on what is currently working, or diversify the channels and try to experiment with and or scale other avenues? So stick to what works or try new stuff is kind of the question, Mark.
Marketing across many channels is risky, I'll say this, because what happens is we're trying to create content that will hit in many channels, which means a lot of content generation. And in my own experience, I find it very difficult to get the content in a place where it speaks to the ideal customer profile and really draws at their pain points and the needs that they have. Just simply telling people that we exist doesn't work. And what I see a lot of companies doing who are trying to market on many channels is they're just kind of yelling at the market saying, hey, here we are, give us a call. And I just don't think that really works. I think it's far more effective to understand exactly who the ideal customer profile is, what your unique selling proposition is, and how you solve their pain points or speak to their desires better than others in the space. And then you get really narrow and deep with your content strategy, and you really continuously speak to them on the platforms that they tend to be spending their time most often. So an example, just one, would be if I were wanting to sell luxury outdoor living spaces to wealthy homeowners. It gets much easier for me to craft content that speaks to that specific customer profile, that talks all about all of the things that I know that they need and the things that they desire, and then create scripts and videos that we deploy on Instagram and Facebook to really speak to that ICP. On the flip side, if I wanted to sell commercial landscape maintenance and snow management services, I'd probably get on LinkedIn and I'd probably just start talking about that nonstop. Every single day I would post about that topic, and I would make sure that I understand their pain points, their needs, their desires, and that I have a better solution and a better strategy to serve those needs. And that my focus is on helping the professionals that manage those contracts eliminate all of their frustrations that they've had in the past dealing with contractors. And so I would just talk about that all the time. And that doesn't cost any money to do that on LinkedIn. And then I would start to target those clients with really well written emails that convert to discovery meetings. And again, that doesn't cost any money. But what I wouldn't do is waste a lot of money on Google ads for that specific ICP, because I just don't think it works. I might pay to have really good search results when somebody searches for a commercial landscaper, but I probably wouldn't pay for ads. I would just pay, again, for optimized search results. So again, it gets very, very specific, the tactics, the messaging, and the approach. And most landscapers are not marketers. You know, me admitting this, I was 10 years studying marketing, mainly because I wanted to grow LMN. And throughout all of the years, I belonged to 3 different mastermind groups. I paid millions of dollars for coaching, and I wasted millions of dollars on lessons learned with bad hires and mistakes hiring agencies to learn this. But I just think it's a really expensive way to learn when you're just trial and error, which admittedly was a lot of what I did. I think it's much easier to do what I said earlier, where you take the time to build a really good brand strategy and a marketing strategy using ChatGPT to help guide you through that. And then you approach professionals and ask them how they do that. And this is one of the advisory services that we plan on launching here this summer, because we do know just how complicated this is and how expensive it is for landscapers. But we also know just how big of an untapped opportunity it is once you get it right.
Okay, question from Anonymous. This is a long one, so just bear with me. We have a nice solid pipeline for the summer and beyond with production home builders and other commercial projects. But we've had a slowdown with building starts, and we currently have enough jobs to keep our guys busy for 3.5 to 4 days a week for the next month and a half. We do not want to lose any guys because we plan on some aggressive expansions. We have committed to paying our guys 5 days a week. We have done design build in the past and would like to get into that again, even if we send all our guys to canvas neighborhoods if we have to. This is the question. What is the fastest way to get some immediate sales with design build?
Fastest way to get immediate deals with design build is to launch an email campaign directed at everybody in your contact list. If you don't have a very good contact list, you can buy one. If you go to Dun & Bradstreet or some other list providers, you can buy that list. You can put that directly into Constant Contact or MailChimp. You can craft an email campaign in minutes using ChatGPT. Again, make sure that you've got a brand strategy. Make sure that you're speaking to that homeowner and you're describing how you solve their most common pain points. Make sure you describe your design process and your sales process and the timeline. And you'll start to notice that you get discovery calls booked incredibly fast from email campaigns. And I personally believe that that's the least expensive and fastest way to get business. Going door to door with a really well thought out brochure, again, that speaks to the ICP, their common pain points, and you're mapping your services and your value proposition very clearly on that brochure. That's going to work really well. I think getting in front of the clients, going door to door, knocking on the doors is great. But I would caution you not to have your field staff doing that. I think they're just not trained in having those conversations, and I think it could actually hurt the brand. And I wouldn't probably pay the crew to deliver the mail either, because it's so much cheaper just to hire a direct mail firm to do that. What I would do with the staff on the extra day and a half that you described is I would deploy a hands-on training program that allows them to cross-train on other types of work. Could be installing pavers, segmented retaining walls, could be maybe teaching them how to use laser levels, how to read drawings, how to read job planners. Could be teaching them how to measure volumes and things of that nature, but I would not pay them to do nothing. I would pay them to help create a more efficient operation. I would spend time training them on the 5S system. I'd spend time training them on identifying the 9 types of waste, and I'd have them restructure all of your job trailers so that they're more efficient, reorganize the shop and yard so that you operate more efficient. And what we're doing here is we're investing in what I call the flywheel effect. By them knowing more and having more skills, and us investing a little time when we're a little quieter in that training and that knowledge transfer, when the work does hit, you're going to move faster and you're going to pay for that time invested in training exponentially, many, many, many times over. And so take all of the downtime and turn it into value added time by investing in training.
Okay, so this is a kind of follow-on question to Ian's earlier one, which you went to the vibe board for, not about scheduling, but more about scoreboards. Further to Ian's question, we're in the process of building crew budgets specifically for our softscape and masonry crews, in addition to the standard construction crews. These softscape and masonry teams have significantly higher revenue per hour and generate a solid amount of revenue. Given that we have multiple crews of each type, would it make sense to create dedicated master budgets for them so they have a realistic benchmark for revenue per hour? Or should we base their budgets on our overall company budget, which has a lower revenue per hour, and simply encourage them to outperform it? Hope that makes sense. Just for context, we're currently focused on residential design build.
Yeah, I definitely believe that we should have crew budgets, and they should definitely be linked to the type of work that they perform. Planting crews tend to have higher revenue per hour than natural stone masonry crews. Hardscape crews that lay pavers definitely have very different revenue per hour than the crew that goes in and does excavation and site demolition. And so depending on how many crews you have and how many specialties, I would say that you should have multiple crew budgets. Generally, my rule of thumb is for every crew manager or crew leader, there's a budget. And that budget dictates what their revenue target is, what their overall labor target is, including transient labor that may get shared from crew to crew, the cost of their assigned equipment and the equipment that they may be sharing crew to crew, the cost of the materials as it's typically hitting the bottom line. Now, we may have changes throughout the year depending on each project, but generally we know what the material ratio is, so we'll apply that. And then we give them an overhead allocation for their crew so that they're sharing in the overhead. So they have a good understanding of where the revenue needs to be and where it goes for their crew. And the most powerful thing there is we assess what the revenue per hour is. So if they've got a crew that's going to work 6,000 hours, we're just going to divide that into their forecasted revenue goal. And that's going to tell us what that dollar amount is, which gives us something to put on the scorecard. But again, it's very different depending on the type of crew. A landscape lighting crew is going to maybe do $500 per revenue hour, and hardscape crew that does segmented retaining walls and pavers is likely to be around 180 to 250. And so very different depending on the crew mix, and we'd never want to average it company wide, or it'll be way under or way over depending on their specialty.
Why don't you just color in that point, Mark, that last thing that you just said, because I just sensed from the chat box and the question box that this is a real something people care a lot about. Can you unpack why these one-size-fits-all approaches to performance management never work? I mean, I just think there's something really interesting there to discuss for the audience.
Yeah, for sure. So if we think about revenue per hour, there's some like serious drivers on revenue per hour, and the drivers are really pretty simple. It's the wages, it's the equipment, and it's the materials. Now, the big drivers here are the higher the wages and the more equipment and the more materials, the more the revenue per hour. Kind of obvious, right? Well, a crew that goes out and does landscape maintenance doesn't sell much material. So their revenue per hour is a lot lower because the material component is missing. Now, they also tend to get paid a little bit less per hour. So that adds to the problem. And their equipment tends to be a little bit less expensive than a design build crew. And so the drivers are right here. Now, even within each segment, let's just kind of go a step further and think about this for a minute. Really important that you think about where the greatest opportunity is in each segment. So let's just say that we've got a hardscape crew, and let's say they do pavers and segmented retaining walls. Then let's say we have a lighting crew, lighting and sound crew, and we've got a soft landscape, or we'll just call it a planting crew, planting and sod, we could say. And then we've got a landscape maintenance crew. And let's even say we've got a snow crew. So very different work types in every scenario. Now, when we go back up to the drivers here and we say wages, equipment, materials, let's just think about a scoring system and kind of think in our heads like high, medium, low. So wages for hardscape, very high. Equipment, relatively high. We need a skid steer, excavator, a dump truck, trailers. So the crew is going to cost more money. And then the materials, definitely going to be really high. And so lighting and sound, same thing, right? We're going to have high wages, a little bit lower on equipment, actually, because they don't need a lot of heavy equipment, but really, really expensive materials that get installed really fast. So the revenue per hour goes up. Planting and sod, the plant material is relatively expensive and it goes in fairly quickly. And we've got relatively expensive labor, really expensive equipment. We're usually using machines to do planting work. And then, of course, we can put a lot of material in a day, which means a lot more revenue at the end of the day. Landscape maintenance, somewhat expensive equipment. We're certainly seeing the equipment prices getting more and more expensive, but relatively low labor costs to the other areas and extremely high labor count as a ratio to revenue. Much higher revenue, spend on labor as it relates to revenue. And so generally what we see with landscape maintenance is a lot lower revenue per hour. So, and then, snow, it's really expensive material, not many hours worked. So again, really high revenue per hour. So I'll give you guys some examples. This would be 180 to 250 per hour under hardscape. Lighting and sound be 500 to 700 per hour. Planting and sod, again, we're probably, depending on the type of work, we're probably in that 180 to 300. Landscape maintenance is usually 60 to 120 per hour. Snow is generally in the 200 to 500 per hour. So when you think about it, the ratios really matter. Now, I'll go one step deeper because I think this is a important topic. Here, what I'm going to see for, let's go $1 million crew in every one of these scenarios. Let's just pretend they were all doing 1 million, which would never be balanced that easy in one company. But let's just look at it this way. For labor, material, equipment, it would look something like this. Now, it's not going to be the same in every company, so don't get too literal. But for that million, we're probably on labor, we're probably going to spend 250. For material on that million, we'd probably spend 200. For equipment, we'd probably spend 150. So when you think about it, we're driving a lot more revenue per hour because of the mix, which is a lot of material, expensive labor, and a lot of equipment. So our revenue per hour is going to be really high. So we'd probably only need a crew of 3 to hit $1 million. Yeah, we might have a few rovers. There's going to be days we might need extra people, but generally 3, maybe 4 people to get $1 million in sales on hardscape, pavers, and segmented retaining walls. Again, we're putting lots of material in. We're using machines. We're using skilled labor. The material's expensive. We can put gravel in the ground quickly. A dump truck loads a big $600 pile of gravel and it's spread within an hour. So revenue per hour is fast, right? We're laying $15 per square foot stone just over and over and over. So the revenue's stacking up a lot faster. Lighting and sound, each fixture is really expensive. We're installing $400 and $500 fixtures each hour, right? We're putting this in really fast. And again, on here, what I'm seeing, and so gross profit here is going to be probably on a good day 50%, 40 to 50 would be normal, 40 to 50 we'll say. Now for lighting and sound, labor here is probably going to be even a little higher. We'll probably be like as much as 300K. Material is probably going to also be like a little bit on the high side. We might be like 300K. But equipment is probably not going to be much at all. We're going to have a truck and trailer. So we might be like 50K on equipment. We're not going to spend a lot here on equipment. So what we end up seeing here is more like, a 60 to 70% gross profit. So we actually end up being far more profitable because the revenue per hour is so much better and we've got such little spend on equipment. So again, a lot of opportunity here to be in that double-digit profit. 20, 30% net on landscape lighting is pretty common. Planting and sod, we're probably very similar to the mix over here in hardscape. We're going to probably be in that 250 range for labor. Material might be a little bit more, depending on what you're putting in. It could be a little bit less too. That's kind of variable. Equipment generally might be a little bit cheaper here. A few less specialty tools, not as many specialty attachments needed, that sort of thing. But, again, we're probably in that 40 to 50% gross profit range. And then over here with the landscape maintenance crew, labor is going to be on that million. It's going to be like 35%. So we're probably more in that 350 range. Our material is going to be very low. Like we only have like 50K or so there. Equipment is probably going to be a little bit lower, maybe around 100. And so gross profit here is probably going to be about 55%. The problem here is we need a lot more overhead staff. And so what tends to happen is we have more account managers, more salespeople. So overhead really spikes, which makes it a little bit harder to make money in landscape maintenance, even though we've got that big GP. Over here, it's generally a little bit easier because there's less overhead staff required for some of the installation work. And on snow, just like landscape maintenance, we're going to spend a lot more on labor. So we'll probably be in that 30% range. Again, really varies depending on what you're doing exactly. Materials, generally we're going to be in that sort of 100K range on $1 million, depending on what you're using for de-icing and the nature of your contracts and whatnot. And then on the equipment side, it's usually going to be a little bit more up on that higher end of things. And so what you'll probably notice is you're in that 40 to 50% gross range. Again, that could be as good as 70%. There's a big variation depending on who you're working for, whether you're a prime or a sub. There's a lot to go around there. But the big point being, the revenue per hours are a lot different. And so when you're thinking about, would you rather make 50% gross profit on 250 an hour or 50 or 60% on $700 per hour? Clearly there's a big difference there. And I think often people aren't thinking, how much profit am I making off of each employee, each hour worked? And when you actually start to think more about that, rather than wanting 300 employees, you might want 100 that have a lot higher profit per hour. And two things happen when you think this way. You can actually pay your staff much higher wages, and you can make much higher profits, which is just a better business to run and own. And so I'm always looking for jobs or work mix that has higher opportunity for wages with more skilled staff, higher opportunity to use equipment instead of labor because we get more work done in less time, which increases the revenue and the profit, and really expensive materials that I can put in really quickly or in a volume scenario. And anytime I watch those drivers, I tend to get higher revenue per hour, which leads to much, much higher paid staff and much, much better profits at the end of the day.
It's a great diagram. We should clip that and put it in the community. I'm going to combine two questions to close, Mark, and I promise I'm not just setting you up to pitch here. There's just enough people asking about it that I think it's worth closing on. So from Rick, he says, we've learned a great deal in the last 6 weeks. My question is, what will LeanScaper OS look like? Will there be a new software operating system? Will LeanScaper be a continued in-person or webinar training thing year to year? So that's from Rick. And then just to layer onto that, Ryan is asking, what is coming in 2025 for the community? How additionally will you blow our minds and change the way the world sees landscaping in the future? So I just think some people are curious about what's in store for them this year and beyond.
At the core of everything that we do is the LeanScaper operating system. Admittedly, we've been, I would say building the product while we're sort of flying with it, and that's never easy. But we will be releasing the LeanScaper operating system book in June, which is a turnkey book that you and everybody in your staff, in your company can read to understand what the LeanScaper operating system is, how to deploy it, how to utilize that system to truly revolutionize the way that you align as a team and work together for better outcomes so that everybody can reach their true potential as one team. So the book helps you understand the system. The accelerator program is designed to help you and your leadership team show up every week with intention and continuously improve by following along with a program to just look at things in the business at the right time and just revisit the way that you do things and together just look at a different way of doing things, following along on a 50-week program. So that's what that accelerator program is designed to do. And that's not going anywhere. We're going to keep working on that. We're going to keep evolving it, keep deploying it 1 week at a time with the weekly sprint and the 4 in-person sessions each year. In July, we're going to release operating system software. So that will be an AI product that helps you deploy the LeanScaper operating system. So everything that you learn in the sprints and everything you learn in the book can be deployed relatively easily using a product that sets itself up. So we don't want to build anything that's complicated, that we need a huge team of people to teach you how to use. Rather, we want you to read a book, join a community, fire up a piece of software that sets you up for success, that helps you create goals, helps you create alignment, manage some meetings, create a scoreboard and an incentive plan that helps everybody just stay aligned throughout the year and really just keep working toward that continuous improvement. And then part 2 to the software is a workflow automation tool that allows you to manage your business with lean principles, to manage all of the workflows in the business with fewer interactions using text and phone. And what it will allow you to do is just operate a little bit more autonomously using AI to drive workflow execution instead of all of the broken communication. And how we do that, I'm not going to share here, but when you see it, it will make life much, much easier. It really was how TBG scaled from 5 to 50 million using a very rudimentary version of what we're building now with AI. So we're pretty excited. We know it works. We've used it and scaled a business with it before without AI, and we know that it's going to be much, much easier for everybody to take hold of and grow their businesses.
Have an awesome Tuesday, everyone, and we'll talk to you soon.
Thanks, Benji.
Thanks,
Have a great
Mark. Bye,
week,
guys.
everybody.